This is Holly, your friendly regional grants manager, and we are here today to discuss writing that grant application. Sometimes that can be a really daunting task, and I'm here to hopefully break it down and make it maybe a little easier, bite-sized chunks for all of you to um, help, get you through the process. So let's get started. All right. So, first of all, when applying for a grant, you want to download the guidelines. Often the guidelines are in a whole separate document. So sometimes you have to look on the website for them. And sometimes they are not a separate document and they're part of the grant. For our grant applications, like the artist support grant, those instructions and all of the eligibility guidelines are actually part of the application. So you don't have to download something separate. You just have to read through the application. So it depends on the funder. But those guidelines are no joke. You want to take time to read them. It's really important, especially the eligibility guidelines, because nothing makes you feel more frustrated than when you've spent, 15, 20, maybe more hours writing a grant application to find out that you weren't eligible for the grant program in the first place. That's the worst. Nobody wants to go there, right? So the eligibility is really, really important. Make sure you read through the eligibility. Make sure that you, if it's a small geographic area like we are at Region 2 Arts Council, make sure that you live in one of the counties that we serve, Beltrami, Clearwater, Hubbard, Lake of the Woods, or Monoman. Before you apply for the Arts Access Grant or the Artist Support Grant or whichever one it is. It's important, for us that you're in our region. But for other funders, other things can be important. Sometimes you have to be at a certain point in your artistic development. You maybe have to be mid-career. So, you want to read about that and what they consider mid-career to be, because every funder's different. And you want to, read through all of those eligibility requirements and make sure that you fit the bill, because you don't want to have wasted effort. So I know that reading can be tedious sometimes, um, but it isn't wasted effort, because if you can figure out that you're not eligible, you can take that funder or that program off your list and move on to programs that can fund you. So it's important to read. And I would take notes while you read too. Take notes on what you need to apply, as well as, like eligibility requirements and things like that. Oh, we've got another person joining. Hello, Lisa. We've already started, and we are recording this, so you can decide whether you want to be on camera or not. And please chime in if you have any questions. We're just going over the importance of reading eligibility requirements in a grant so that you don't have any wasted effort. You apply for this thing and then find out later that you were ineligible. It's a bummer, because you put so much work into it. So it's
Yeah.
important to learn that to know that you're eligible. And then we were just talking about the importance of sometimes taking notes when you read through the application or you read through the grant guidelines on what you're going to need to apply.
Okay.
So, yes, you
Yep.
have a question?
Me?
Yes.
Oh, nope, nope.
Oh,
Sorry.
okay. Sorry. I thought I heard you.
Oh, no, no. And I'm switching over to my laptop because I just got home from work and I wanted to log on right away. So if you see me trying to come back in, that'll be why.
Okay.
So,
I'm happy to let you back in again. No
okay.
problem.
All right. Just keep talking and I'll just keep doing my thing until.
Okay. Um, the other things that you're going to be looking for is what you need to be able to apply for this grant, right? Um, I like to think of your grant application as kind of like a recipe. You know, if you're going to build some sort of recipe, you're going to bake something or whatever it is. The first thing you do is you get all your ingredients together, right? Because you don't want to get part of your ingredients together and find out you have to go to the store. Ah! You know?
Mhm.
So, writing a grant is the same way. You have to have all the ingredients there. And those can be things like work samples, resumes, your budget, what you're going to spend things on. And so those are all really important for you to pay attention to and gather all of those things before you start writing your grant application. It's going to save you a lot of time. So definitely take notes on those guidelines and the application. Read through the application first before you apply. Don't start cold. I know that it's really um tempting to do that. You're reading through this grant application, you're like, "Oh, I know what I'm going to say for this question. I know what I'm going to say for that question." And you could go through and do that, but really it's better, I think, if you craft the application because it's got to be a whole thing, and it's gotta tell a story. It's gotta tell the story about you and, why you need funding and what you want that funding for, and, it's gotta read well for the board or the, grant review panel or the, funding manager, whichever funder you happen to be, writing to. That's a good thing to know too, is to who's going to be reading this application. Sometimes you can attend webinars or view video instructions. We have video instructions on our website at Region 2 Arts Council to help you through applications, to help you through pieces of the application, to talk to you about work samples, to talk to you about, what's an artist resume, what's an artist bio, those types of things, because those are the things that we require and other funders might have like other requirements like let me see let me share my screen really quick. um Minnesota State Arts Board, let's go to them. They're really good about having all sorts of information about their grants. And under this resources for applicants, they always have their information sessions page, and you can go there and you can sign up. So that is all good stuff to know.
Recording in progress.
So if they do offer some sort of, um, I think somebody is having some feedback, maybe.
That, I think that's me because I just signed in.
Okay. Maybe sign out of the other device if you've got two devices going, or turn
Yep, I
the,
did that.
oh, you did. Okay, there you go. All right. Okay. So, so anyway, if they have webinars or they have video instructions, make sure that you go through them. You don't have to listen to the whole thing if it's me, because mine tend to be really long. You can always fast forward. That's the cool thing about watching something on video. Or you can tune in for the part that you really need and tune out for the things that, aren't applicable to you. So I think that those things are really valuable. So if they have something like that, take advantage of it. Um, Another thing that you can do is if you have any sort of specific questions, like say you look through the eligibility guidelines of the grant program that you want to apply for, and you have a question like, am I eligible or not? I think maybe I could interpret this as I'm eligible, but then I'm worried. Those things happen and it's not always a really cut and dried thing. If you have any question at all about your eligibility, contact the program manager or the grants manager um, of that foundation or the foundation staff. They can be an invaluable resource. So you definitely want to contact people if you have any kind of problems or if you're worried about your eligibility. For funders that might be invitation only, you can write a letter of introduction or inquiry describing, what you do and how it aligns with their mission, or even request an interview. So hopefully you can start to show up on their radar and get invited to apply if that's the kind of funder that you're applying to. Make sure you research their process, though, or call to inquire if their website is unclear because some funders that do invitation only, if you approach them in the wrong way, you're kind of off their list forever. So, you know, be careful and how you approach them and make sure that you approach them in the way they ask you to. So, I think that's important too. Um, okay, so another thing, accommodations. Some of us sometimes need an accommodation, and that's okay. Maybe, if you need them, if you're struggling to apply because maybe your screen reader can't view the website, or there's not closed captioning on the instructional video, or your sound to text conversion isn't working, or you have problems typing, maybe due to an injury or limited mobility, or you can't look at a screen for very long because you're neurodivergent or you have cognitive impairment, do not suffer in silence, okay? Ask for what you need. Most funders have accommodations ready to go, but you have to ask. And I know that sometimes that can be scary and weird, but don't let it be. I mean, most grant managers are people like me. They're nice people. They're not all scary.
Mhm.
So, if you need an accommodation, ask for it because that's what they're there for. Let's see. So, we talked about gathering all that information up. We talked about reading the grant application first and the guidelines, if they have guidelines and those types of things, and looking at what you're going to have to supply. And I talked about, it's like a recipe. You've got to have all your ingredients in front of you before you start writing this grant application. So make sure that you gather all that info. Sometimes that can take more time than you think. Um, it's just like, if you're out of something and you have to go to the store, it can take a long time. So make sure that you have, if your organization, you might need your EIN number. Some funders ask for your social security number. Um, that's rare though. Usually they only ask for your social security number after you have been awarded, but some of them ask for it up front. So, find out what you're going to need. You're certainly probably going to need your address, phone numbers. You might need specific documents. If you're a organization, you might need your 501(c)(3) letter from the IRS. If you're doing a big project where you're working with other people, you might need resumes. If you're an artist, you're definitely going to need your artist resume or bio. You might need an artist statement. You probably are going to need photos or links to videos or websites to be able to show your work samples so that they can see samples of your work. So you'll have to have those all prepared. And maybe that's going to be a long process. Maybe you're need to photograph your work. Maybe you need to get a professional to photograph your work because you're not very much of a photographer. Maybe it can turn into a bigger thing than you think. So that's the first step always, is make sure that you have all the things that you need and be ready to go before you start writing the application. And one of the things that I really suggest to people is when you do start writing the application, keep all your answers in a separate document, like a Word document or something, and put all of these ingredients that you need, all of these artist resumes, artist statements, all of your work samples, put them in one place. I don't know if that's, on a USB drive or on a cloud drive or, in a specific folder on your computer or something, but put them all in one place so that they're easy to get to, like one of those cooking shows where they have all the things in the cute little bowls. Um, so that, it's easy to upload them, to grab one and upload it and those types of things because most grant applications are online these days. If you only have paper documents for some of these things, then make sure you get them scanned so that they're ready to upload and also so that you can preserve them, for the future. That 501(c)(3) letter from the IRS for nonprofit organizations, everybody asks for it over and over and over. If you only have a paper copy, get it on digital, scan that in. I can help you with that if you wanna come to my office, I can always scan things for you, but have it scanned and ready to upload because that's important too. So, then the next step is to log in and actually start your application and start writing, or start writing a paper application. There are some funders that still, do paper applications. Like I said, I recommend you using a separate document like Word or Pages or Google Docs or whatever you use, Open Office, I don't know, to keep the answers in your possession, but also to make editing easier. So when you get that application all together and send it to the funder, um, you you might not have that information anymore. You might not have access to it anymore. So if you put it in a separate document, you know what you said. And if they ask you questions about it, you'll have it there. You can look at it, you can see it. So I really recommend that. I think that it really helps. And I think that it makes editing easier too. If you're editing it in, a word processing program that you're familiar with instead of trying to edit it in whatever their software, their online software is, because some of them are easier and some of them are harder, and it's just oftentimes easier to do it in your own word processor. And you never know when technology is going to fail you. If your computer fails to upload your answers to the internet, or you forget to save the form, or the paper application that you were writing on gets coffee spilled on it and now it's totally illegible and you don't remember what you said, you still have those answers because you put it in a Word document or whatever, you put it in your Google Doc or whatever it was and it's saved and you haven't lost any of that hard work. So I think that that's a sound strategy to use. So think about that. So, does anybody have any questions so far? So, there's all the preliminary stuff that you have to do to get ready. Does anybody have any questions yet? No. Okay. So, we'll move on to actually writing the application. So, the next task is that you need to effectively tell your story in this grant application. And I recommend going through the application and answering all the questions first. Okay? That's the easy part. Then you go back through and you read your answers and you edit it with an eye for the big picture. So, for one thing, make sure you're not saying the same thing over and over again. Think about the whole application as a story, okay? And you only have so many characters oftentimes with these online applications. Sometimes, you've got 500 characters to say what you have to say. You have 1,000 characters and that's all you have. And that's only a few paragraphs. So, um, you want to be careful with what you say because you have a very limited space. And we all know that it's much harder to write in a brief way than it is to just go on and on and on, right? So the first thing that I would edit for is, make sure you're not repeating yourself. And think of this kind of as like you would think of an essay for school. I know that that sounds like boring. Like, "Oh, I don't wanna do homework." Um, but I think that that's a really good way to do it. Like, think of the whole application as a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Just like you would an essay or a paper. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. So the beginning questions in a grant application are usually about you. They're about your organization. So think of that as kind of your introduction. What do they need to know about you? What do they need to know about your history or your project? Read the funder's mission statement and the grant intent description again. You know, your introduction should align with the goals that the funder has for the purpose of this grant. So, so for like the artist support grant, which is a grant that's open right now through Region 2 Arts Council, for individual artists, they can apply for up to $2,000 for support that they might need to do, um, you know, uh, whatever it is you do as an artist, right? To kind of fuel your creative endeavors. Um, So that's the intent of the grant. So when you tell us that you want funds, you want to tell us what you're going to do with those funds. And just saying, I'm going to buy this piece of equipment isn't enough. You need to tell us what you're going to do with that piece of equipment. What kind of creative endeavors is that going to open up for you? How is this piece of equipment going to change, your technique or your process, or, maybe you can make more of something. Maybe you can make faster. Maybe, you can make things, much more fine with this particular tool or whatever it is. Um, you know, Whatever it is, you've got to articulate not just that you want to purchase it, but why you want to purchase it, if that makes sense. So, that's the introduction part. It should align with the goals the funders laid out for the purpose of this grant. So that's something to kind of check on. Then the middle of the grant application. Now, this is the big part. This is the part where there's the proposal, there's the budget, those types of things, things with teeth, the nitty gritty details about the project or how you're going to use this funding, and how you're going to accomplish this. It's all those nitty gritty details. So you already should have shared your organization's mission or your general info about yourself or your art in the introduction part. So don't repeat that info here. Instead, concentrate on the details, the budget, what you're spending money on and why, the timeline. If you're doing a project of some kind, and with the artist support grant, it doesn't have to be about a project. But some grant applications, it is about a project. So you have to talk about that timeline. How long is it going to take you to do this thing? And those types of details that are really important. Um, Sometimes for some funders, they ask about outcomes and evaluation, or they ask about your goals as an artist. So you'll need to figure those types of things out. And sometimes they have specific questions, and sometimes they ask you to put that in the proposal. So you'll have to figure that out, and what you're going to say about that. Let's see, what else? Sometimes they ask about community or personal impact. So you'll have to think about that. And then if you're an artist that's applying, usually you have to supply work samples or examples of your work. If you're hiring artists, You usually have to give work samples of or examples of their work. So maybe past successful projects that you've done, or info on staff and artists that you plan to hire. So those are all. Oh, somebody else is joining us. Okay. And those are all things that, you're going to want to put in that middle part. Like I said, all the nitty gritty details. And the big thing is usually the proposal. That's usually where they give you the most words that you can use, the biggest amount of characters, right? Unless it's a video proposal. Some places also allow you to do a video proposal. So you can decide what kind of proposal you want to do, if you want to write it or if you want to speak it on video. Um, and one of the things that I think people overlook in the proposal a lot is if you put it in your budget, also put it in your proposal. So if you're spending money on it, the funder wants to know about it. They're giving you money and you're spending their money to do something. So everything that's on your budget should have something about it in your proposal. So the proposal part is the why. That's where you can tell them the why, the importance of this thing that you're buying, whether it's you're purchasing equipment, you're hiring an artist, you're hiring a mentor artist to work with you, whatever it is. If you're spending money on it in your budget, talk about it in your proposal. I think that's one of the best pieces of advice I can give you. You know, the 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 budget can be pretty dry, and you can bring those budget numbers to life. You can show why those expenses are needed. You can tie them to outcomes if you have outcomes as part of what they're asking about. You can tie it to, impact on participants or the community impact that this is going to have. You have a small space to accomplish all of this. So you have to be succinct. And that's part of the editing process, where you craft all this and then you go back and you edit it again, right? So let's move on to the end part. So the end part of the application is the wrap up or the conclusion of your story. So here you want to tell the funder without repeating yourself why they should fund you or your project or your organization. Often here is where they might ask about the potential demographics of who you might serve. They might ask you about your demographics if you're applying as an individual. They might ask about the impact of your organization or your career if you're funded. There might even be a section where you can upload supplemental information like detailed lesson plans, detailed description of the equipment you want to purchase with the grant funds, an equity statement or an accessibility statement, evidence of honors or awards that you've had, press statements or articles about your organization. So, be ready with that kind of stuff too. And make sure to craft your story with the funder and their grant program in mind. You're often more likely to get funded if your project fits easily within their guidelines for acceptable use of their funds and if your purpose aligns with their purpose. Does that make sense? Okay. Anybody have any questions yet? Okay, we're gonna push on. All right. So after you've crafted this introduction, this middle part with all the budget and the proposal and all of the information about impacts and outcomes if they ask about it or goals and those types of things, and then your conclusion about, wrap it up why you're good to they should spend their money on you. Um proofread Proofread, proofread, proofread. It is way more important than you think. And if possible, get a second set of eyes to read your grant application and look for those spelling errors, punctuation, grammar mistakes, links that don't work properly, etc. It really sucks when you've spent all this time uploading your stuff to YouTube and getting it just the way you want it, and then you didn't realize that your link to YouTube didn't work, and so the grant panel couldn't view this really cool video that you put up there for them to see. So it really, really pays to proofread, because one of those little tiny details can sink your application. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, grant writing is a competition. There are other people writing grants for the same funding you are. And, if they have great grammar and all the capitals in the right place and their links work, um, they might have the edge on you. So give yourself all the advantages that you can and make sure that you proofread your stuff. Especially if you're applying with a really large funder that gets a large number of applications, like say you're applying with the Minnesota State Arts Board, which gets hundreds of applications. They have to have a way to weed out those applications somehow. They just have too many. And so something small, like a link not working, could just toss your application right out of the running. I mean, we don't do that because we're a small regional organization, a small regional arts council. Um, so we usually try and work with people as best we can, but we also don't allow you to change anything once that deadline has gone by. So if you gave us an application with links that don't work, so you don't have any work samples, then you don't have any work samples. So it pays to check those things. It really, really does. Um, let's see. What else? Okay. Are there any questions before we talk about writing a budget? Okay. We're going to go right into it then. Okay. Everybody's favorite, writing a budget. Uh, this can be frustrating. I understand that. But you are applying for funding and they need to know what you're going to spend it on. So, most grant applications ask you to provide some sort of estimated budget. Sometimes they provide a template for you. Sometimes there's a form. Sometimes they ask you to structure your own budget form. Sometimes they kind of want you to put it in a narrative format. So you've got to just read the instructions and see what they want. For the artist support grant, we ask for a very simple budget. But sometimes, budgets can get complicated, especially if you are applying for an organization that's doing some really big arts project. Sometimes funders just want you to describe the expenses that are going to be covered by the grant. But sometimes they want a complete budget for the whole project and they want to know kind of what the grant is going to be supporting, like what part of it is going to be supported by the grant. Um, so read the budget guidelines carefully if they provide them. They don't always. Sometimes it's just instructions, but sometimes they have a whole budget guidelines document. So read that carefully and see what they're looking for. Um, because, you want to provide the easiest to read and understand information that you can in the whole grant application. That's what you want to do. You want that grant panel or that funding person or the board or whatever, whoever is reading these grants, you want them to be able to understand easily what you're asking for and why. So definitely read the budget guidelines if they have them, or the instructions. And make sure you know how much you can ask for. What are the minimum and maximum awards for this grant program? Okay. That's an important thing to know, because if you ask for too much, more than is allowable of their maximum amount, you might get your application ineligible. So, that's a good first step. Know how much you can ask for. What are the minimum and maximum award requirements?
Well, I have a
Um,
question.
yeah, please.
So let's say that their max is $10,000, but you need, let's say, $15,000. And so as you're writing this, you could say, with my first 10,000 is what I'd like to do. Once this is accomplished, then would you bother to say that you will apply for another type of a grant, or you just leave that part out and don't put in there some of the stuff that you
No,
need?
it depends on what they ask for. It
Okay.
really depends on what they ask for. But certainly you can. I'm going to cover that a little bit in a minute here.
Okay.
So first of all, you've got to figure out, like you were just talking about, does that maximum award cover your project? Or will it cover your project if you add the grant award plus, say ticket sales or registration fees from the event? Um, can you list other funders if more income is needed? So uh, that's that's something that you'll have to figure out if they allow you to utilize income. So
Mhm.
some grant applications just ask for expenses. They only want to know what you're going to be expending and where their grant funding fits in. But other projects, they want a more complicated budget, and they want to see how you're going to pay for the part that they can't pay for. So, like you said, for your scenario, if they're only offering $10,000, that's the maximum award, and you need 15 for what you're going to do, they
Mhm.
might want to know where you're going to get that other $5,000. Do
Right.
you have another grant that you've applied for? Do you have grant funding in hand that you've actually secured? Um, are you going to charge, like a ticket price? Is that a way that you can generate this other $5,000 through some sort of income like that, where you're going to have ticket sales or you're going to do a workshop where there's going to be registration fees? Maybe something like that. Or maybe you can just simply say, if you have been planning this and you have this as part of your, operating budget, this is the line item for this thing, $5,000. That's what we have to offer. And lo and behold, you have $10,000, which is exactly how much we need. Hooray! Or that you're going to use your savings or something. So I think that if you can articulate that, do. Um, Sometimes, like I said, it's part of their budget template uh, if they give you a template, or part of their budget instructions, that they want you to tell them where that extra funding is going to come from. And sometimes it isn't, but you can kind of slip it into the proposal that you already have funding for this other piece of it. Um, it just depends on what questions they ask and how they ask them. Uh, so another question to figure out on a budget is, can you list in kind as income? And some of you might not know what in kind is. So, in kind, it means in kind donations, which are non cash donations. So, they're donations of goods or services. So sometimes you can show that you had somebody donate something, um, you had somebody donate beverages, water for the kids who are going to be in the musical production, so you don't have to buy that. You had somebody donate their time as an attorney to help with something, or as an accountant, or I don't know, something like that. It usually means for services, it usually means professional services. So, sometimes you can use that as a source of income, but that's rare. But sometimes you can you list your own funds? We talked about that. So, you kind of have to see how they've structured the budget, and what they want you to do. And it can be different for every single funder. And I know that that can be frustrating, but it's the reality. So, um, one of the things I would say, and I think that this is smart advice, make your expense requests reasonable. Don't ask for the maximum award if you don't really need it. Don't list some extravagant expense that's only tangentially related to your project. Like, I'm a school that's applying, and I'm applying for an arts grant, but I'm asking for new playground equipment because it's going to be the set of the school's play this year. That's pretty transparent. Like, you're trying to use the grant for something that it wasn't meant for, and eh, so don't fall into that trap. Are there any other questions so far? Okay, let's go over some other budget pitfalls. Okay, so another thing that can come as an unwanted surprise is a cash match. Commonly, 20% of your total project expenses can be asked for as a cash match. We at Region 2 Arts Council do not ask for cash match anymore. We don't ask for any kind of matching in any way. But a lot of funders do. So watch out for that. Sometimes, they either require matching funds from you, or maybe even from another funder. They want to know that you're funded by somebody else, and then they'll fund you as well. So watch for those things. And one of the things that you'll have to answer is, do you have the funds available to meet that match requirement? So watch for that. Another thing to watch for, another big pitfall, is unallowable expenses. So, say for Region 2, we get a lot of our funding from state tax dollars. And state tax dollars come with a lot of caveats, a lot of strings attached. And there's a lot of things that we can't fund. So you need to look for any unallowable expenses. Oftentimes, any kind of capital improvements will be unallowable expenses, like maintenance or improvement to a building that you own, or purchase of a building. Those are things that are really hard to find funding for. So that's usually something that's not allowed. Certainly, like buying a vehicle um, is usually something that's not allowed, especially if it could possibly be a personal vehicle as well. So think about those types of things. Rent or mortgage for your office or building, that's something that's not usually covered unless you're applying for like operating support or something like that. The same with staffing, often administrative costs, or at least administrative costs have to be kept under a certain threshold. Ours is 15% of the total project cost. So watch for those things. What about travel? Is travel covered? Is only in-state travel covered? Which is what we are, because we are funded by state taxpayer dollars. So they want you to stay in the state because the state taxpayers paid for this. So we can't cover out of state travel with a lot of our organizational funds. For the artist support grant, we can cover travel because that is funded by the McKnight Foundation for us. So we can cover travel in that, even international travel if you were going to an artist residency in, Italy or something like that. But not all places do. So look that up. If you have travel in your budget, make sure that it's something that can be covered. Equipment. Some grants don't cover any kind of equipment. So, look at that. Certainly the artist support grant that we were talking about earlier, that definitely covers equipment. But sometimes there might be a cash match just on equipment. So, definitely read those budget guidelines if they have them because they will list these unallowable expenses. Oftentimes, any kind of food for events like either concessions or refreshments or those types of things are unallowable expenses. The state doesn't uh want it looking like you're partying on their dime, that type of thing. So, and there's lots more things. I mean, these are just examples that I've come up with. There could be other things as well. So definitely look out for unallowable expenses because sometimes if you put an unallowable expense in your budget, um, the funder might deem it ineligible. It's got an unallowable expense in it, ineligible. We don't do that. We allow you to do a revised budget, but not all funders do. So watch out for those unallowable expenses. And another question to get answered about the budget is, are you allowed to make a profit with the grant funds? Because not all funders allow you to do that. At Region 2, we do, but we want you to use those profits if you're an organization on other arts things that you're doing. You can't just, have a party with it or whatever. Um, but some funders don't want you to make a profit on the grant funds. So that's something to look out for because if you then, get the grant funds, you are funded, you had a successful application, and then you do your final report and you report that you made a profit, you might be in trouble. So definitely look at that before you apply so that you're aware and that you already know that from the beginning and you can
So go
put that
ahead,
in your
sorry.
budget. Yes.
Well, so are most grants then for just nonprofits?
Most grants are for nonprofits or for individuals.
Okay.
But not always. I mean, certainly there are foundations that fund small business loans and things like that sometimes, or they fund entrepreneurs who are trying to start a business. So those funds are out there. Um, but certainly the most common kind of funding is from one nonprofit to another nonprofit, or from a nonprofit to an individual or a group of individuals. I think that that's probably the most common funding. I mean, even Region 2 Arts Council, where I work, um, we are a re-grantor, we get funds from the McKnight Foundation as a grant that we apply for, and then we re-grant those funds to individuals in our community so that McKnight can reach people in our community. So, that's part of what we do. So, yeah, I would say that most common is funding from one nonprofit to another, or like charitable giving from a nonprofit to individuals or groups of individuals. Does that make sense?
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Let's see. We're almost coming up on time here. Let me see. What else have we got here? Um, so that's pretty much, crafting an application. So the next part would be submitting the application, right? So I recommend submitting your application at least a day in advance of the deadline. Don't go right up to the last minute if you can avoid it. Your technology can fail you at the last minute, or maybe an unexpected life event can come up and cause you to miss the deadline. You know, things happen. So I would say try and get it in early if you possibly can. Because if you fail to meet the deadline, then you're simply not considered for the funding, period. And any kind of time that you have put into um, the application is lost, which is a sad thing. So, and oftentimes you have to wait a whole year for that deadline to come around again with that grant application to be able to apply again. So, um, I just say, get it in earlier if you can. And if you don't get an automatic confirmation that your submission has been accepted and you're worried about it, just call or email the funder to confirm receipt of your application. I mean, most funders expect that, and most funders will give you a submission, let you know that you successfully submitted. But if they don't, for whatever reason, you just might want to call and ask just to make sure that your application is in. So, so I'm afraid we're about 5 minutes away from when we were going to stop. And that's actually a pretty good place to stop. That's pretty much a whole grant application. Um, so, does anybody have any questions? Do you want me to go over it real quick one more time? So, basically, first things first, get all your stuff together, right? Grab all that stuff that you need, work samples, all the things, and figure out where you're going to put them. Get that organization done first. Then write the grant application. Make sure that you save those answers somewhere, like in a separate Word document or Google document or something, so that you have those answers. Because oftentimes when you submit that application, you're cut off from it. And, if you need to answer questions about, what you said, or, if you want to be able to use these answers in a different application for a different funder, it just makes sense to put them on a separate application. Craft that application. Make sure you've got a good introduction, you've got a good meaty middle, and you've got a good conclusion. Make sure that it fits the funder, make sure that it fits the funding, make sure that your budget doesn't have any of those unallowable expenses, that you understand how the budget works, that you've got a good proposal. Anything you say in the proposal you should put in the budget in the proposal, those types of things. If you've got it in your budget, tell us about it in the proposal, why you need that funding for that thing, or for that, why you're spending money on this particular artist, why you're spending money on this particular piece of uh, equipment, why you're spending money on, how it's going to help you do whatever it is you do. If you're doing a arts project, if you're doing, you know, uh, you're doing a creative endeavor of some kind, tell us how this is going to help. And then the conclusion part, um, kind of wrap it up. And sometimes it's great, how when you were a little kid in primary school and they talk about you take your introduction and you use it for your conclusion, type of thing, like you reiterate. Well, this is something that you can do in a grant application too. That introduction we talked about, making sure that what you're doing fits with what the funder is looking to fund. And sometimes you want to reiterate that in the conclusion part. And sometimes it might be about, a lot of funding these days is about what audiences you are serving, or, what kind of community impact you're making, or what kind of impact this is making on your life as an artist. So that's a good way to do a conclusion sometimes. And then, submit it when you're sure that you've proofread it and you're sure it's ready to go. And then, submit it a little early if you can, just in case there's tech glitches. That's pretty much it. Does anybody have any questions? Do you have any questions about some of our specific grant programs too? I'm happy to answer that as well. No? All right. Well, I hope that this has been good information for you guys. And I wish you luck in all of the grant applications that you're going to write. And if you're writing grant applications to the Region 2 Arts Council, remember that I'm here and that I'm the grants manager, and it's my job to help you. So if you need help, contact me, and I'm always happy to help answer questions, help with tech issues, upload things for you, type something in if it's not working out for you, whatever. I'll figure it out and help you. So, just be aware
So
that that's something that
I
I
have a
do.
question.
Yeah.
If we don't see a grant on your website that is for us, where would you suggest that we look for grants?
Actually, I think that I sent you a link to the
Okay,
first iteration of this
okay,
intro to grant writing, and it was
okay,
all about finding funding and researching funding.
okay.
And so
Mhm.
I would view that video, and it's also on our website
Okay,
under
great.
grant information and grant, what is it? I
I
gotta look it
watched
up.
the video. It was really helpful because I'm
Yeah,
the
so
first
that
issue.
that might be good for you to watch and
Yeah,
figure out how to find funders.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions before we sign off? Well, thank you so much for coming tonight. I really appreciate you.
Hmm.
And I hope that you'll come to our next one next month. And I'll send you out information about it. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Holly.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.